Think back to April 1974. It's a Wednesday afternoon, and life in small-town America is in its groove. In Xenia, Ohio, kids are staying late at school for play rehearsals. The radio is playing Benny and the Jets, heavy breeze, and a sky that's beginning to turn a sickly, bruised shade of green. It looked like a typical spring storm, but high above them, an invisible war was being fought. Cold air from the west collided with thick, humid heat rising from the south, creating something violent and unstable, something no one on the ground could see. At 4:40 p.m., the sound changed. It wasn't the wind anymore. It was a roar so deep, it felt like the earth itself was screaming. In just 9 minutes, a century of history was ground into dust. This wasn't just a storm, it was the day the sky fell. This is the story of Xenia, the day a town disappeared in the shadow of the Super Outbreak. The morning of April 3rd, 1974 started warm. By noon, the temperature had climbed into the low 70s. The air felt thick, heavy, like something was pressing down on your chest from above. In Xenia, a town of about 25,000 people tucked into the farmland of southwestern Ohio, life moved at its ordinary pace. Nobody looked at the sky and saw the end of the world, but something was building up there, something that hadn't been seen in modern memory. By mid-afternoon, the sky had turned strange. People looked up and frowned. Something felt wrong, but nobody could say exactly what. The Weather Service had issued warnings, severe thunderstorms possible, but this was Ohio. Storms came through every spring. What they didn't know was that April 3rd, 1974 would become the most violent day in American tornado history. That before the sun set, 148 tornadoes would touch down across 13 states. That 6 of them would reach F5 intensity, the maximum possible. That over 300 people would die before morning, and Xenia would take the worst of it. At 4:30 p.m., the track team at Xenia High School was finishing practice. Some of the kids had noticed the weird color of the sky through the gymnasium windows, but practice was practice, the kind of afternoon you forget about by dinner. It was 10 minutes before everything changed. The first sign was the silence. Not quiet, silence, complete and total. Then came the sound. Some described it as a freight train. Others said it was deeper than that, lower. A sound you felt in your bones before you heard it with your ears. A roar that seemed to come from everywhere at once. At 4:40 p.m., the tornado touched down on the western edge of Xenia. It was massive, half a mile wide at its base, spinning at speeds that would later be estimated at over 300 miles per hour. An F5 on the Fujita scale, the most violent category that exists, and it was moving fast, impossibly fast, nearly 50 miles per hour across the ground, heading straight for downtown. People had seconds to react. At Xenia High School, Principal Charles Dunkel heard the roar and made a split-second decision. He grabbed the microphone and ordered everyone to the hallways. Hundreds of students dropped to the floor, pressing themselves against the interior walls, covering their necks with their hands. Some were crying, some were praying. The tornado hit the school at 4:42 p.m. The roof peeled away like someone opening a tin can. Walls collapsed. Windows exploded inward, sending glass flying like shrapnel. The gymnasium, where the track team had been practicing just minutes before, was torn apart. That morning, thinking about tests and crushes and what they were going to do that weekend. 9 families that would never be whole again. But hundreds more survived because of those hallways, because of that principle, because someone made the right call at the right moment. That's the mathematics of survival in a tornado. The difference between life and death measured in feet, in seconds. Across town, the funnel was cutting a diagonal path through the heart of Xenia. It tore through residential neighborhoods, ripping houses from their foundations like they were made of paper. It crossed Main Street, destroying businesses that had been there for generations. It hit the railroad yard, picking up freight cars and scattering them like toys thrown by an angry child. One survivor remembered looking out her window and seeing a car floating past, not flying, floating, suspended in the swirling grey air like it weighed nothing at all. Another man recalled being in his basement when the tornado passed directly overhead. He said the pressure change was so sudden, so violent, that his ears popped and he couldn't hear anything for hours afterward. When he finally came up, his house was gone. Not damaged, gone. Just the basement walls and a concrete floor covered in debris that had come from somewhere else entirely. The path of destruction stretched 9 miles long and half a mile wide. In just 9 minutes, the tornado had cut Xenia in half, and then it was gone. The silence that followed was almost worse than the roar. People began to emerge from basements and closets and bathtubs where they'd taken shelter. They climbed out into a world they no longer recognized. Entire blocks had vanished. Streets that had been lined with homes and trees and parked cars were now just empty scars of churned earth and scattered wreckage. The landmarks people had used their whole lives to navigate were simply gone. Survivors walked through the ruins in a daze. Some were searching for family members, others were just trying to figure out where they were. The familiar geography of their hometown had been rearranged, and they couldn't orient themselves anymore. One woman later described walking down what she thought was her street, looking for her house, only to realize she was 3 blocks away from where she thought she was. All the visual cues she'd relied on her whole life had been removed in 9 minutes. The sounds were almost worse than the sights. People calling out names into the grey afternoon, dogs barking somewhere in the rubble, car alarms that hadn't been silenced, going on, and underneath it all, an eerie quiet where there should have been the normal sounds of a town. Traffic, voices, life. The smell was something people remembered decades later. A strange mixture of fresh turned earth, splintered wood, natural gas from broken lines, and something else, something wrong. The smell of things that should never have been torn apart and mixed together. As the sun began to set on Xenia, the scope became clearer. 32 people were dead, over 1,000 injured, more than 300 homes completely destroyed. Another 2,000 damaged beyond easy repair. Half the town was gone. What hit this small Ohio town was just one tornado in what would become known as the Super Outbreak, the largest, most violent tornado outbreak ever recorded in American history. In a span of about 18 hours, from April 3rd to April 4th, 1974, 148 tornadoes touched down across 13 states, from Illinois to Alabama, from Michigan to Georgia. The entire eastern half of the country was under siege from the sky. 6 of those tornadoes were rated F5, the maximum possible intensity. Xenia was one of them, but there were others. Tanner, Alabama, Greene, Brandenburg, Kentucky, each one leaving its own trail of death. Each one destroying communities that had stood for a century. By the time the outbreak was over, 315 people were dead, more than 5,000 injured, property damage measured in the billions. It was a day that rewrote the record books. That changed how America thought about severe weather. That proved even the most prepared communities could be caught off guard by the violence of the atmosphere. But for the people of Xenia, the statistics didn't matter much. What mattered was what they could see in front of them. Their town in ruins, their neighbors dead or missing, their lives turned upside down in 9 minutes. That first night was chaos. The power was out across most of the town. Gas lines were leaking. There was no way to know if more storms were coming. Emergency services were completely overwhelmed. The National Guard was called in. Volunteers streamed in from surrounding communities. Hospitals in Dayton, just a few miles away, were flooded with casualties. Doctors and nurses who had finished their shifts stayed on, working through the night. But in those first dark hours, what saved Xenia wasn't the professionals or the government. It was the people. Neighbors searched through rubble with their bare hands, looking for survivors. Strangers opened their homes to those who had lost everything. People who had been competitors in business worked side by side, clearing debris and setting up shelters. On the edge of the tornado's path, one couple had watched the storm approach through their window. Their neighbor's house was directly in its path. They saw it destroyed right in front of them. Their own house, just feet away, was spared. Hours later, when volunteers came by to check on them, they found the couple sitting on their couch, eating ice cream. When asked why, they shrugged. "We figured if we got hit, we wouldn't survive anyway. But if we did survive, the power was going to go out for sure. Be ashamed to let the ice cream melt." A reminder that even in the darkest moments, People found ways to be human, to find humor, to survive not just physically, but emotionally. 7 days later, a college softball team from eastern Ohio traveled to Dayton for a game. Their route took them directly through Xenia. The van had been raucous on the way. College kids singing, joking, carrying on the way they always did on road trips. Then they crested the hill east of town and saw it. The devastation stretched out in front of them. Block after block of rubble, the skeleton of what had been a downtown, debris piled in mountains where houses used to stand. The van went silent. Nobody spoke a word, not a single voice. The singing stopped. The jokes stopped. Everything stopped. They drove the main road through Xenia in complete silence. Nobody could find words for what they were seeing. They didn't speak again until they reached Dayton. If you've ever seen tornado damage up close, you understand. Pictures don't capture it. News reports don't capture it. You have to stand there, in the middle of what used to be a neighborhood, and see the scale of it with your own eyes. The randomness is what gets you. One house leveled to the foundation. The house next door missing only a few shingles. A family of 5 dead in their dining room. Their neighbor blown 60 feet through the air and surviving with a broken arm. There's no pattern, no logic, just the physics of violent air meeting human lives. In the following weeks, Xenia buried its dead. Funerals packed with mourners. Small caskets lowered into the ground. Families shattered by 9 minutes of violence. But alongside the grief, there was work to be done. Mountains of debris to clear, people to house, a town to rebuild. And Xenia refused to die. Within days, temporary housing was being set up. Within weeks, rebuilding plans were being drafted. Within months, new construction was rising from the rubble. There was a determination in that town, a stubbornness, a refusal to let the tornado have the last word. They rebuilt the high school. They rebuilt the churches. They rebuilt Main Street, not exactly as it was before, but rebuilt. And they remembered. Every year on April 3rd, Xenia pauses. There are ceremonies, moments of silence, stories shared between generations. The tornado is part of the town's identity now, part of its story, not the whole story, but a chapter that can never be erased. The Super Outbreak of 1974 changed America. Before that day, tornado warnings were primitive. Radar technology was limited. Many of the people who died had little or no warning that a tornado was approaching. After the outbreak, everything changed. The National Weather Service invested heavily in new technology. Doppler radar, which could detect rotation inside storms, became standard equipment. Warning systems were improved. Public education campaigns taught people what to do when a tornado threatened. But for the people who lived through it, the legacy isn't about technology or policy, it's personal. Ask anyone who was in Xenia that day. They'll tell you exactly where they were when the tornado hit, what they saw, what they heard, what they smelled. The memories are burned into them like a brand. A boy who was walking home from school when the debris started hitting him. He jumped into a storm sewer and rode it out underground, huddled in the darkness while the world above him was torn apart. For years afterward, he carried the scars, dots and dashes across his arms and face, a permanent record of those terrifying minutes. A track team member who sheltered under the grandstands at the school's athletic field, who emerged to find a different world. These memories don't fade. They become part of who you are, part of how you see the world. Today, if you drive through Xenia, you might not notice anything unusual at first. The streets are lined with houses. The downtown has shops and restaurants. Kids go to school. People go to work. Life goes on. But look closer. Notice the architecture. Many of the buildings date from the mid-70s onward. The rebuilt Xenia, the town that rose from the rubble, and talk to the people. Ask them about the tornado. They'll tell you stories, maybe their own, maybe their parents'. The memory has been passed down through generations now. It's part of who Xenia is. One visitor came to town decades after the tornado. He found a friendly town, an inviting place, people who were warm and welcoming, a community that had been through the worst and come out stronger. The tornado took 9 minutes to destroy a town. It took years to rebuild, but rebuild they did, and 50 years later, Xenia still stands, still remembers, still lives. That's the real story, not just the destruction, not just the statistics that fill the record books. The real story is what happened next, the way a community came together, the way a town refused to disappear. If you ever find yourself driving through southwestern Ohio, take the exit for Xenia, drive through the downtown, look at the buildings and the streets and the people going about their ordinary lives. Remember the 9 minutes that changed everything. Remember the 32 people who didn't come home that night. Remember the survivors who carried their scars, visible and invisible, for the rest of their lives. Remember the strangers who opened their homes. The couple who ate ice cream because they figured if they survived, they might as well enjoy it. Remember that this is what America looks like when disaster strikes. Not panicked, not defeated, just people taking care of each other, doing what needs to be done, moving forward one step at a time. And that's the story worth telling. If you lived through the Super Outbreak, if you have memories of that day or the days that followed, share them in the comments. Like and subscribe to help us to keep improving the channel. If you'd like to support it through Super Thanks or becoming our first member of the channel, I truly appreciate it. We've put a lot of research into this to get every detail right and tell the story from a different perspective, but if miss anything, we'll keep improving in every video.